Hit the go live. Let me know when you see it live.
So it's live.
Sometimes it takes a second. Can you guys in the chat hear me?
Yes, ma'am. From here.
Well, I know you guys can from StreamYards. Here we go. Okay.
All right. It's coming up on my laptop here.
Hello, everybody. I haven't done a live stream in a really long time. I've been sick, recovering from surgery. But we've got a really interesting live stream tonight. Matt's here with us again. Say hey, Matt.
Hello.
And we also have Roger. Roger is he was at Route 91 the night of the shooting, and he has been involved in a separate lawsuit with MGM, and that's what Roger's going to talk about tonight. So Matt and I are going to kind of keep quiet and let Roger go. And Roger didn't really come forward before because he didn't want anything to mess up the lawsuit and things like that. But I'm going to let Roger talk and just kind of let everybody know what's been going on. And thanks for coming on, Roger.
I appreciate it. And I'll try and keep this kind of minimal. I put out some other videos, but just a little bit of background. I'm a former Marine. I served about 10, almost 10 years, 3 combat tours. Happened to end up serving in a military police unit for 2 of those tours, working security operations on the border from Syria into Iraq. I ended up running a squad. I was a team leader and then a squad leader. I've been on a machine gun, expert rifleman kind of thing. I do have a little bit of training in demolitions, but security was kind of our bread and butter. Basically, like border patrol here, searching vehicles, you know, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, this was actually my first concert as an adult, and I had gone with my girlfriend. At the time, when the first couple pops happened, the lady in front of me said, "Is that gunfire?" And I said, "No, it's probably fireworks." I was being a little cocky, and I was like, I would recognize it. And I heard pop again. I said, "No, that I did recognize it at that point." I said, "No, that is gunfire." And that was right before it erupted into the first volley. I started moving to get my girlfriend out. I told her not to run toward the main gate. We were near gate 6, near the private boxes. We were just in front of them, on the far side from Mandalay Bay. The rounds started coming in around everybody. I ended up running in between the private boxes to give us some cover because metal containers. And as we were coming around through the back of them, the rounds were ricocheting underneath them all around us. I ended up kind of putting her behind there was a hot dog cart back there, and ended up putting her back there with a couple other people and said, "Stay here." I ran back toward gate 6. I started looking for backpacks, anything out of place, trash cans. I'm thinking terrorism at the moment. I don't know if this is a multifaceted attack, but I'm hearing the gunfire and I'm thinking terrorism. So I started doing what we're trying to do and looking for secondary devices kind of stuff. And I didn't see anything that stood out, but I ended up crouching behind a barrier because they had those concrete barriers, Jersey barriers there. And there was a lady that was disabled, and she was trying to get up, and she had a cane. And I said, "Stay down. You have cover here. You have protection. The bullet's not going to come through this." And so she stayed there. I kept popping my head up. I was counting rounds in my head. I knew that there were either a drum or extended magazines because this was well more than 30 rounds, and that's what I carried. 30 round. I carried an AR-15 and a 9 millimeter pistol as well during my deployments mostly. And so I knew these, based on my training, that it was extended in some way. Um, at that point, I was trying to count rounds, but I was popping up to direct the crowd out and kind of usher them out because there was no one at that point. And so probably a crowd, 60, 70 people came out. I ended up jumping that barrier and running in during the volley stopping. And when I ran in, I looked to my left and there was a young blonde girl reaching up saying, "Help me." And I didn't know who she was at the time. I didn't know anybody else there. Like I said, it was just me and my girlfriend. And I asked her where she was hit. She told me in her armpit, her right armpit, and she was there with another girl. Turns out that girl happens to be Jen Gibson, her good friend. I didn't know, like I said, either one of them at the time, but she told me where she was hit. I told her girlfriend I was about 15 feet away from her. I yelled at her, apply direct pressure to the wound, stay with her, call her family. In all honesty, in that moment, I didn't believe based on sound of the weapons, knowing it was probably a high caliber weapon, trajectory, tumble effect. I know what these weapons do to internal organs. They don't just stop, they bounce around or they go straight through, one of the two, you know. And so I didn't think that her chances were great in that moment. And two guys were dragging a woman out by her arms and her legs were on the ground and she was limp, completely limp. Um, they were out of gas and the rounds started coming in again. And so I told Jen, apply pressure, stay with her. But I ran out to help who I thought I could help, you know, get people out. That's what we're trained to do. You save who you can save and you keep moving, you know, like that's shitty. It's something I deal with every day, but I did what I was trained to do in a mass casualty situation. I ran out, grabbed her legs, remotivated them, said, come on, let's go. We ran her out to gate 6. We stopped the black SUV, one of the black SUVs that has like TCP and a serial number on it. So some hired driver service. We banged on the back door. The driver rolled down the window. I said, we need to throw her in the vehicle. There was a couple in the back seat and they kind of got a little pissy about it. I was like, I don't give a shit. Like, we got to get these people out of here. We opened the back door. They moved over. We threw her in the back seat. But before she went, like we had laid her down on the ground, she had been shot in the back and she had no feeling. She was not moving. Her eyes opened and she looked at me and she said something to the effect of like, you know, it was something religious basically. And I remember saying it to me and we lifted her up, put her in the back seat. That vehicle took off. I turned around, ran back in, and I ran up toward the corner of that the ISO container, the private box there, right at the corner. And there was a girl down there. There were two other people, three other people with me, and then more people started coming. I looked back and I saw some guys starting to come forward. You know, everybody else is exiting. There's a couple guys coming forward, and I see a cop. I yelled at the guy. I was like, "Grab that container," because she was a bigger girl. And I actually ran back, and there's video of this um, on one of the body cams of the officer. But I actually yelled at them, "Grab the container." They did. I ran back to help them grab the container and ran back in with them. We all lifted her up. There were several people helping. It wasn't just me alone kind of thing. We put her in it was basically a portable dumpster on wheels. And we ended up pushing her out. It was me, her brother, and the officer. We got outside of the gate, and there's a famous photo with all the cops standing around the car, and you can see Mandalay Bay, and they're at the corner. You know, I already knew that their protocol is to set up an outer cordon of the area so that whoever doesn't escape and they can kind of lock down the area. And so I already knew that they were going to do that. And we got out to their position and I turned the container over, asked her where she was hit. She was hit in her left leg, just below the kneecap. And so I asked the time from her brother specifically, as my phone had died and he said 10:17. And so the volleys had already stopped for about a minute and a half, almost 2 minutes. And we didn't know if it was going to restart. But I grabbed his belt, made a makeshift tourniquet out of it. We ended up putting her in the back of a little white car and told her to get him to the hospital. Turned around, put another girl in another car, and then I ran back into the venue. I started looking for my girlfriend. She wasn't where I left her. Started looking around, started trying to help some more people get out. Um, Came back out. I ended up running down toward Tropicana. You know, there were crowds outside of the venue along the streetway there. And I ran into Tropicana, and there's people lined up all against the wall crying. I'm running through scanning real quick, looking for my girlfriend, calling her name. And then I get out the other side, and I'm trying to cross over the overwalk to get to Excalibur where we were staying at. That was closed down. I jumped the wall. I ended up throwing up, kind of having a little anxiety attack. And there were firemen already outside. There was like one or two trucks that had showed up. and they weren't letting anybody cross. I said, "Look, I'm a Marine. I need to get across the street. I'm going." They waved me through, ran and jumped the wall. I run up that, they've got these like movable escalators to Excalibur. I'm running down those. I get to the front desk. I go up to the front desk and I'm like, "Has anybody checked in? Looking for me?" They said no. I said, "Look, there's something really big going on. There's a big shooting across the street." I said, "You guys need to start taking accountability of anybody that checks in with you guys or comes in. Y'all need to lock down this building." And I was like, "Families are going to start calling here." I'm like, "You need to get accountability of who you got here." And they were like, "Oh, our manager's going to start handling." I said, "You guys need to start taking down names." I run up to the elevators. I go up the tower. I go back to my room. She's not there. I come back down the tower. Uh, don't see her. I run out the side exit. I end up jumping. I believe it was a fence, and that's right basically near Arco, where the Arco is. And so I cross the street. I come back down. I think it's Giles Street off the top of my head. And then I come back in the venue the same way I went out. Um, Run back in, start looking for people. I turn around, a girl had been shot, um, and I didn't know it. Her legs were hanging out of the same, as a very similar dumpster. Her legs were just literally hanging out of the dumpster, probably about 25 feet from me. And I was like, "Oh shit." I turn around, a girl's walking wounded. She's shot in the eye. She's bleeding from her eye. She's walking. I walked her out toward there was across the street in the dirt yard, there were a bunch of cars that were parked there. There was an ambulance there, and they had some kids back there, and there were some people walking out there. I kind of started walking back with her just to make sure that she got there. I go back into the venue again. I'm looking, for my girlfriend, like, what the hell happened? Um, Come back out, go the same route, run back, same route back to the hotel. I get back there and I get to the elevators again, and I turn around and here comes my girlfriend. She had jumped in a cab and they went the long way around. Um, my phone was dead. I had called my daughter right before the gunfire had happened, and my phone died. But we were filming videos, Jason Aldean and everybody, and after everybody's singing "God Bless America" and stuff, and you know, I remember the the October song, or was it November by Big and Rich, and it was about a veteran, and his story, combat story, and my phone had died during that, and so my girlfriend was filming, and I didn't know it at the time, when this was going on. We weren't looking up at Mandalay Bay, but when we got back home that night, we went we went to the bar there in Mandalay. I'm sorry, in Excalibur, and they wouldn't even serve us. They would just give us water, and I was like, "I need a fucking beer after this," like it was complete chaos. I had basically run a marathon back and forth. Um, they wouldn't serve us. They locked down the building. SWAT, basically a makeshift SWAT team is coming through. An ad hoc team. They're sweeping the building. And so I'm sitting there with her, and I was like, "This is what they're going to do. They're going to lock down the building. They should be going floor to floor to make sure there's nobody in this building, this and that." We end up going back up to our room. It's about 11:30 midnight at this point, and my family's all on the East Coast, but my daughter's here in San Diego. We were supposed to be back here by 4 o'clock on Monday because I needed to pick up my daughter from school. And so we get back to our room and we turn on the TV. And at that point, they were only announcing like two people, shot kind of thing. The numbers were real low. I was like, "No, this is much bigger than that." I call my family. Nobody answers. It's like 3 in the morning there. I leave a message with them just so they didn't freak out, and she calls her aunt. She had already been on the phone with her aunt. Her aunt is a retired nurse, so she was gonna drive out here that night because they couldn't find me. And I was the driver, and so um, they they're talking on the phone and trying to figure out what they're gonna do there. And um, I laid down on the bed, to be honest with you, and I passed out. Like, I mean, just straight adrenaline crash, And so I wake up in the morning. It's a ghost town. I go downstairs. I didn't hear about the bloodlines at that point, but everybody was, doing these bloodlines and food and water for everybody in line. I was like, I can't go out and deal with that. I literally sat down at a machine and started just gambling. I started drinking beer. I was like, I can't deal with this right now. I was like, I need to chill out. I can't go back out there right now. And she did the same. And we chilled out for a little bit. I had like a beer or two. Waited a little while, could give it a couple hours, and went back to the room, collected our stuff, and we got in the car and drove back. We stopped and got gas before we left, and we pretty much drove back almost in complete silence the whole time. But we get back here, we get to her aunt's house, and we were staying with her at the time. And the funny thing is, I told her family, I was like, I just have a bad gut feeling, like, and I had PTSD, so I don't like big crowds. You know, concerts aren't my thing, like big crowds are not my deal, and so I told him, I was like, I have a bad gut feeling. I already knew about ISIS threats to Vegas. I just, you know, I knowing the area there, I was like, this is surrounded by buildings. I'm like, there's threats everywhere from this, just a bad gut feeling, but I didn't know anything specific. And so, I think that kind of freaked them out because they knew I mentioned that to them beforehand. And my girlfriend's like, well, I bought these tickets and you said you were going to drive and I'm going to go without you. Like, either way. And I'm like, I'm not letting my girlfriend go to Vegas for 3, 4 days without me. So I was like, let's go. We got in the car and left. But when we got back, I got an ass chewing from her aunt and from her. Like, oh, what? You didn't think about your daughter? Why are you running back into gunfire kind of thing? I'm like, I'm sorry, but you just don't understand. Like, this is what we do. We go to help people. Like, you don't leave people behind, and um, did what I could. It's never enough, in my mind. It's like you get everybody out, but that's unfortunately the way it is. I couldn't save everybody. I helped who I could. And I knew when we got back to the hotel, I wanted to go back, but at that point, my girlfriend's like, no, and I thought about it for a second and I was like, you know what? These guys are going to be coming in heavy with all the cops coming in. I was like, I'm potential. They don't know who I am. I'm like, I'm just another potential threat to them. I'm like, I'm just going to stay here with her. And I passed out. Um, so when we got back, kind of getting chewed out a bit, are you being a hero kind of thing, and this and that. And I didn't look at it that way, but, I understand their perspective. And, it wasn't the smartest thing to do in the world, but that's what we do. And so about a week goes by, her friends are calling and, everybody's asking what the hell happened there. And nobody knows the story, I I'm remembering it a little bit different than other people. And, you know, certain training that I've had and having been around heavy automatic sounding gunfire and being shot at a lot, like I knew that the echoes, the ricochets, I knew it was coming from Mandalay Bay. And the stories that were coming out were basically a lot of propaganda. It turns out to be, like in the moment, I'm going, well, what's true, what's not, and I just knew it was a lot of propaganda and BS. And so I started really digging into it, and I had befriended somebody that after some of my research that had been shot in New York, along with 4 other people, and she had been shot in almost the exact same spot as the girl Sam that we helped get out, and she was a dance teacher. And I remember the story because there was a big deal about it legally because they were trying to go after her Facebook page and they sent private investigators after her and trying to say, well, she went to a concert, so she couldn't really have PTSD. And, you know, she's walking, so she can't, she's not permanently injured, but she's still permanently injured. She can no longer teach dance. Um, but it was a big deal at the time. And I remember it making national news. And I remember all of the shootings that have happened. And you're talking the mob. There were a lot of casino incidents with guns back in the day, and armed robberies that I knew that were going on. And you know, I just knew that there was a lot more than just Kai Dunbar. So you had Kai Dunbar 3 years prior, convicted felon caught with a bunch of rifles up in his room. The mass shooting in 2007, armed robberies. Then I start finding out about the FBI HRT team having done a training scenario through Doug Papa with LVMPD and an executive officer that was LVMPD at the time that was there, Tom Lozich, that's a corporate security officer for MGM, that was at the training scenario where they were shooting a mannequin from a helicopter simulating a high-rise attack. And I'm going, these guys had a lot more knowledge of previous incidents, and they were much more liable than they let on. Um, Also, I started digging into his father's background. I started digging into his background, and I found out that his father was on the FBI's most wanted list for bank robbery. I started looking at the psychology of him and his childhood trauma of losing his father at roughly 7 years old, and basically not having any contact with him. And that's psychologically, that's profiling. You usually go back to what traumatic events in somebody's life led them to be, a serial killer or, you know, a mass shooter. And a lot of these mass shooters tend to copycat each other. And Paddock did break the mold because he was older, wealthy, and everything else. But there were some various similarities that stood out to me, and the fact that he copycatted part of a movie called Accountant. He's an accountant. It came out the same month that he started buying all the guns. Um, it's about taking down the mob and these bad, corrupt guys, a corrupt CEO, helping yet embarrassing the FBI. The father like figure in the movie is almost nearly identical to Stephen Paddock's actual father when he was about 7 years old. That would have triggered him. So when you look at the FBI report and it says the memory of his father, well, they didn't say where that came from. Like, what is your basis for that on psychology? I'm like, maybe because I wrote it, and I'm like looking at this and it's dogs playing poker cheating. Then I look at it and I find out that he had been involved in a slip and fall at a casino in 2011 at Cosmopolitan, and I started digging through records, and that he had an outstanding balance from that, and that they forced him into mediation and tried to cheat him, and he had torn his hamstring, so he had $32,000 in medical bills. He sued him for basically 100 grand, pain and suffering. He's a multimillionaire. That's a drop in the bucket to him, but he lost, and he basically had to pay some fines and everything, or fees and everything, and but the day that they ruled against him was, I believe, October 2nd, 2014, when the judgment was ruled against. October 2nd, 2016 is when he started buying all the guns. You know, I think that's the motivating factor right there. That he's getting cheated in comps, dogs playing poker where they're helping each other and cheating. So then I started looking at, I'm telling the lawyers this, and my lawyer knew, but then I find out that they're altering my dates, when mediation's going to start. My girlfriend shared the same lawyer. Her documents are different than mine. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then I find out, I announced to the lawyer, I said, please tell me it's not Jennifer Tagliati. He comes back and says, it is Jennifer Tagliati. I'm like, well, I got a freaking problem with that because her father's a VP of security at Mandalay Bay the night of shooting, in charge of security, safety, and surveillance. But not only that, and everybody seems to leave this out, he's also a former retired FBI agent. He was in charge of organized crime and drug units before he retired. But he also previously ran the Department of Safety under Governor Gwynn there. He was let go. He resigned, but they were going to let him go. So he goes to work for MGM. He was there for 11 years. And then roughly 10 days or so before Jennifer Tagliati takes on this case, Steve Sisolak brings him over to be the director of public safety again for the entire state. Now, I'm sitting here going, you just had the biggest security failure on your watch. And I'm not blaming him necessarily, but he's involved in security. I'm looking at security. I'm like, he's going to testify. He's going to have to testify on security matters. And they bring him over there and he leaves. And yet you had the biggest security failure on your watch since 9/11, essentially. And now you get a promotion to run the entire state safety department again. Like, that was very fishy to me. Then I find out, I told the lawyer, about Tagliati, and he confirms it. Then I find out they're not telling everybody. And I see that they had altered my dates, that later that month, like 2 weeks later, that the mediation was really starting, when they told me March 4th through 7th, 11th through 13th. And I'm like, baloney. So then
Hang on,
I went,
Roger. I'm going to interrupt you a minute.
Roger, there's somebody I want to ask a question.
sure.
Well, another thing I was going to say is you skipped over the part about how you did your lawsuit separate. So I think some of the people in the chat are lost.
Okay,
But
so
go ahead, Matt, and ask your question. I'm going to mute again.
sure.
All right. Somebody was asking in the chat if you or anyone in the crowd ever pinpointed a general direction of where the gunfire was coming from, and if so, did you see any muzzle flash from the hotel from 135?
So when I was there, I did triangulate it to Mandalay Bay upper floors. I didn't know specifically which room at the time, of course, like everybody else, but I knew it was coming from upper floors. Um, I based on the sounds, the ricochets, everything else, and later on even sound analysis that was done
Mm-hmm.
by a professional sound analysis guy through the documentary done with Ramsey Dennison through Money Machine. Every sound analysis that I heard uh, did jive with my recollection that it was coming from a single source, from Mandalay Bay. Um, as far as the um, going back to the lawsuit, so when I was told by the lawyers to kind of chill out a little bit, that they would get some information out. And at that point, I had already put out in some of the chat groups about Jennifer Tagliati, and then it got hushed, and a lot of stuff started getting deleted. And so near the end, I thought I wouldn't be the only person to opt out, but they were trying to really seriously talk me into it, and I had let my attorney go, and I was looking for another attorney, and I wasn't finding anybody. Well, all of a sudden, a bunch of the bigger top end lawyers that were part of the steering committee were coming at me and a group, and they're like, we're going to represent you, this and that. I was like, I don't trust any of y'all at this point. Like, nobody's telling the truth. I let them go. And so I had about a week and a half before the deadline, and I wasn't finding any lawyer, because this was potentially malpractice at this point, like this is much bigger than just, what they were letting on. And I knew it was insurance fraud at that point. My stepmom happens to work for Zurich American, the insurance company that they sued in court, in federal court, and lied to, and said this was unforeseeable. Basically said it was just a negligence claim to get them to pay for it. But if it's foreseeable, blatant negligence is not covered. I mean, why would they cover it if you knew that this could happen and you're not protecting against it? And so I felt that this was fraud on the insurers and upon the victims. And so I wrote my own lawsuit. It was nearly 50 pages. I wrote it by myself. I had a friend help me kind of, proofread it, but I didn't have a lawyer, and so wrote it. It went to court, and I had a different judge at the time, Judge Trevor Atkins, and I didn't know it at the time, but later on, I found out that not only did Robert Eglett donate to the Judge Bell, who was the handler of the main case, she allowed Jennifer Tagliati to be a mediator. Um, we were all arguing over the whole conflict of interest of her being involved in joint model centers for mediators. It said she should have recused, regardless of whether or not Nevada adopted those standards. I mean, it's pretty reasonable that you know the guy that's running security there, his daughter shouldn't be brought in to do this mediation. She should have been nowhere around it. But they were basically concealing that from everybody. And I know of certain people that tried to opt out afterward, and they weren't allowed to. So we did the story with 12 News NBC out of Arizona with a couple people, and they a bunch of people came forward and said, "Well, we didn't know about all this." And Eglett got on there and said, "Well, you could still opt out." But then I know of a specific person, because I've seen the letters, says, "I want to opt out," and they said, "Well, you can't." And it's like, okay, like what's going on now? And I found out, Robert Eglett apparently threatened to sue NBC for airing it, and um, I wrote my lawsuit. I found out later on. I'm going through all the motions and stuff. I mean, I've had nearly 50 hearings with Judge Bell and MGM's lawyers, and they started off with a lawyer against me, and they ended up bringing in the main lawyer against me and another guy to help out. And basically, all of my evidence wasn't being accepted. And I wasn't getting it all perfect by any means. I've never sued anybody. I'm not a lawyer. I'm having to learn as I go. But I know that When I got back with my girlfriend, I started going through all of our videos. I was like, what did I miss? And one of the videos, I started zooming in specifically at Mandalay Bay, and I slowed it down and I started watching. I had like 14, 15 videos, and I started looking through them all, and I'm like, what did I miss? And all of a sudden, my girlfriend's video, she happened to accidentally film the window being shot out. You can see it blow out the window, and you can see rounds coming out of the window with the glass flying out. And so I'm like, I'm looking through LVSA, the shooting archive, all their videos. I have yet to come across one single video that has actually show the 32-135 or the 32-134 window being shot out. I'm not talking about just muzzle flash. I did not personally see the muzzle flash when I was in the venue, but in this, I can see it. I can see the gases expand. It retracts, and that's from a sealed room. It's blowing out, the vacuum effect sucking back in, and then blowing back out. I can see the rounds. I can see the glass fly out if you zoom in close enough. Um, no other video that I've seen shows that, and I believe that is very intentional. MGM has all these cameras from all these different hotels, even above Mandalay Bay, yet not one video. I think that's very key. Um, some of the videos have been edited down to start at 9:50, 1 minute after what my video shows, which I find very suspicious. Um, Not only that, some of this, you know, security, security bread and butter kind of stuff. Like this guy was able to walk in multiple times. He never got stopped once. So if security was doing their job, they would at least been doing random security checks, right? I mean, even if you're not stopping everybody, you're at least randomly picking people out and stopping and searching their bags or whatever. After reading through the report, the baggage handler broke protocol. He took him up the service elevator. Normally, they take their bags and go up separately and give him a ticket. He broke protocol there. Not once within that week was he stopped and actually checked. Um, he goes up to the room. Not only that, they allowed him to check into the secondary room under his girlfriend's name. That's how he got the 32-134 room under her name. Like, you shouldn't be allowing people to check into other people's rooms under somebody else's name without them being present. They lied about that in court, by the way. Um, you know, Campos. Campos goes up the stairs. He's taking his sweet time, but when he comes down and he goes finds the emergency exit door blocked, he goes in, sees the locked door, he calls it in, hears drilling sounds. Now you got to consider this Sunday night, 10 o'clock at night, roughly. You hear drilling sounds at 10 o'clock at night coming from the adjacent room. But you don't go up and knock on the door and inquire why it's so loud at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday. No maintenance is going on at that, kind of night. But yet he turns around and walks the hell away. Very suspicious. He's unarmed. He's checking all these rooms. So they're understaffed in security. He has no weapon. There's a
I'm going to
question
interrupt
on.
you again, Roger.
Sure.
They're asking if you can play that video you were just talking about that your girlfriend took. Is it on your YouTube channel still?
It is. It's titled 949 Las Vegas First Shots.
Okay,
Now,
and your YouTube channel's just called your name, right?
yes.
Because I think
So
if you try to pull it up here, it's going to cut you off the stream. So as long as they know where they can go find it, that'll be
yeah,
good.
the full video is roughly 2 minutes and 30 seconds long. You have to zoom in and slow it down yourself. That is an unedited video. Nothing has been tampered with. I have a direct screenshot of her phone with the timestamp showing 9:49. The video actually starts at 9:47. The gunfire, the video is roughly 2 minutes and at the 2:16 mark in the video. So I calculated putting at 9:49 roughly is when the window gets shot out. Um, but essentially, that video is unedited. Somebody else online, because I don't have video editing software and I'm not that technical with video software, um, edited a copy of it. He condensed it down to like 30 seconds long. He edited it, and it basically usually pops up right under mine, but it's a shorter video. And he zooms in and expands it, so it's much easier to see. On my video, you have to zoom in and slow it down and know where to look. So just a heads up on that. But that is completely unedited video directly from her phone, direct copy. Nobody else has touched it. Um, so with that said, I've been in court, many times. Been doing it all online from here. I've had to pay for every transcript because I knew transcripts were very important for any kind of review. Um, I had a problem with. I didn't have a problem with the first judge, but I had a problem with Judge Tagliati or Judge Bell coming in because I had watched Judge Tagliati's retirement video. I also was doing homework on Judge Bell and Judge Tagliati, and I knew that they went to law school together. They've been friends a long time. They hang out at each other's house. I figured she took over for Chief Justice from Judge Tagliati. Suddenly she's retiring, supposedly to go play more golf, but then she takes on this case, and then she goes to work for the gaming board, so she really wasn't retiring. I think she was going to make a lot of money off of this deal and protect her father at the same time, and nobody was going to be the wiser. And Judge Bell, they're good friends, and I didn't know at the time, but later on I found out that Judge Tagliati also had some involvement in Judge Bell's personal child's adoption story, along with some other judges that helped her. And so the night before she ruled against me, let me back up for 1 second. The day that she took on my case, I asked her to recuse because of that friendship. I said, it's a conflict of interest. I said, you yourself could become a witness to how this was allowed to proceed in the main case. I was having some troubles with my third and fourth causes of action because it was for bad faith and insurance fraud. Bad faith contracts, insurance fraud. Apparently, it falls under the Attorney General in the state of Nevada to prosecute. That guy is Aaron Ford. He is a former law partner of Robert Eglett. He gets elected during this time, and is good buddy with the governor at the time. You got Steve Sisolak tagging along at every meeting, every press conference with Joe Lombardo. They were buddy, and I'm going, these guys all know, and they're covering it up. But at the same time, you got MGM offering to build a new SWAT facility on the festival grounds. I'm like, that's millions of dollars. It's a multi-million dollars to roughly $38 million piece of property. You're just going to donate the land and build this building for them while they're doing an ongoing investigation. I'm like, that's garbage, and sounded like a bribe to me, influencing a public officer. And so Judge Bell didn't recuse. Um, I felt like she was kind of stonewalling me. I mean, I gave her the video. I'm presenting documents. I'm telling her what's going on, and it seemed like she was kind of keeping things under wraps. She wasn't being completely unfair. I wasn't getting everything perfect, but um, I basically, MGM was making the statement that I couldn't prove that I had damages. Robert Eglett went on 8 News Now with Brian Loftus and said, well, out of 4,400 people, only one person opted out. It's almost never unheard of kind of thing, and only one person. And then he minimizes my case, and he's like, well, it's my understanding that he had no damages, he had no treatment. The most he would have got was the minimum $5,000. Well, that's not true. They never even collected my medical record. I told my lawyer, and I have emails corresponding with him at least twice saying you never collected it. He said they would. When I fired him, the next day they contacted my therapist, my only therapist, who was a private therapist through the VA, and she contacted me, and she's like, they just called here trying to gain access to your medical records, and I denied them. I said, great. I said, thank you for denying. They tried to use an outdated authorization for one, and it was to cover their ass because they never got my medical records. But yet, through the letter that I got to opt in, they were offering me $14,000, just over 14,000. I'm like, so that's over the 5 grand if I had no treatment, but yet you never collected my medical record. I have over $58,000 in medical damages through the VA document, and so from being hospitalized from stress and everything else over this, and I was suicidal. I'm watching all this shit go on, and I kind of felt helpless, and I'm not getting help, and I'm trying to speak out. I originally went to the media anonymously because I'm not looking for fame. Like I just wanted them to look at this video because it counters the entire narrative of timeline. And I got letters from them saying, well, take it to the police because we're not the investigators. Like they'll report on a dog shitting on somebody's lawn too many times, in the neighborhood, uh, on the news. They'll cover a story about anything, but yet you won't even look at the video that counters the entire timeline of the largest mass shooting in modern times in the country. I'm like, there's something wrong here. And no media would speak to me. I finally had LA Times that drove out several times from Vegas to interview me, including on my birthday. And then like a couple days before the story was going to come out, that reporter retired magically after 25 years and left the industry. And he says that he claims that it had nothing to do with me, but that he couldn't corroborate my story. So what do you mean you can't corroborate my story? I have email traffic with Sam Mark June and my girlfriend at the time saying, he protected us, he ran back in, he saved us, this and that. There's body cam footage from the LVPD with me in it. I'm like, you can't talk to her because now she's deceased. You know, I'm like, what the hell? Like this could be corroborated. I'm credible. And so that didn't happen. And that was kind of a blow. I'm stressed out. And I'm like, nobody will speak to me because it sounds like a conspiracy theory. And I get it. But everything that I've said, I've backed up. Like I've got documents on. I've got paperwork. MGM lied and said they didn't allow him to check into a secondary room under his girlfriend's name. It says it in the LVMPD report. And then they claim, well, we have nothing to do with Mandalay Bay. We just own the corporation, the companies that own Mandalay Bay. We have nothing to do with the festival grounds other than owning the company. I said, well, that's a lie. And they're like, well, you can't prove it. I said, oh, yeah. Well, here's a certified copy of the festival permit. It's signed by an executive corporate officer from productions. Um, and he came down from MGM Resorts. It doesn't say from that the festival grounds company. It says from MGM Resorts International Corporate Productions Office. And so I'm like, you're lying. I've recently submitted this because the judge ruled against me, basically arguing that I wasn't on the festival grounds, so I couldn't collect. Um, I've disputed that. I think I told you in an earlier conversation that they tried to use an alternative definition of premises that governs the statute of innkeeper's law. It says, but not limited to the property. Um, and look at it this way. I try and equate it to this way. If that building, if this wasn't terrorism and say that building fell down and it collapsed and killed a bunch of people, you're going to tell me that if that building fell down across the street and killed me on the sidewalk, just because I'm not on their property, I couldn't collect damages or my family couldn't for my harm? That's baloney. But MGM knows this and they know that they're liable. And so they've used every excuse in the book. They even originally asserted the Safety Act on me. And I disputed that real quick and shut them down on it. I'm like, first of all, DHS hasn't determined that this was a terrorist act. Second of all, it didn't apply. That's not what the intention of the law was for. It was originally designed to help emerging companies, emerging technology to be developed without the threat of being sued if it failed in the wake of 9/11, so that it wouldn't discourage these companies from coming out with AI technology and all these different bomb detection systems and all that kind of stuff. I was like, it was not meant for this kind of act. And they knew it, but they tried, like I said, every argument in the book against me. So then Judge Bell rules against me. And she's basically writing on all their behalf. All she had to do was come up with one uh, dispute of fact that should have led this to a jury to determine negligence, which is normally determined by a jury trial, not by a judge. And that's what the Supreme Court has said. But she even tried to, say that there's not one dispute. I asserted my medical records, an affidavit. Um, I asserted a list of 10 different incidents that should have warned them to have a higher state of security during this after other incidents. She basically canned all that. I appealed directly to the Supreme Court, and they accepted my case. They passed it down to the appellate court for review. So I always try to dispute their arguments to the Supreme Court later on. But essentially, I wrote my case briefing to the Supreme Court, And then when it went to the appellate court a couple weeks ago, I submitted a request to present new evidence that would show that the night before Judge Bell ruled against me, Robert Eglett threw her a fundraiser because she's running for Supreme Court seat A, which is James Hardisy's seat. But yet I had already knew back in November of 2021 that James Hardisty was retiring. He's not running for reelection. She's not running against anybody. There are no announced candidates against her. Robert Eglett throws her a $2,500 dinner at his office building. That most people also didn't know that in the main case, MGM's lawyers, Pisanelli Bice, Pisanelli Bice, James Pisanelli was in the main case and in my case. He's the lawyer, and they share office space. He rents office space from Robert Eglett. They're all in the same building. So I thought that was a conflict of interest as well. Technically, it's not through conflicts of interest, but it should be. I mean, they're paying you, and you're paying him rent. You guys are all buddy buddy. Y'all share the same office space. Well, so he throws her this $2,500 fundraiser the night or two before she rules against me. He donates 10 grand to her. He maxes out. Several thousands and thousands of dollars were raised for her. Ultimately, a little over $300,000 has been raised for Judge Bell, but she doesn't have an opponent. So why are you throwing money at her the night before she rules against me? Not only that, I didn't know it at the time, but I started going through records. I found out that right before the previous judge was on my case, because I was asking for a security injunction on Mandalay Bay security, I found out that he also donated $5,000 to that judge in my case at the time he was in my case. So, it's looking very suspicious. And then I see that there's a third person that he donates to, and that judge is potentially up for the appellate court that might potentially hear a portion of this case. And I'm like, oh, that's such a coincidence. And so I'm looking at the money, I'm following the money. I also had followed the money. I actually told my lawyer what the amount of the settlement was before the lawyers even knew. I was following their SEC filings. I knew the amount between 735, 800 million before the lawyers did. Robert Eglett comes out a week later and he says, not even close. There's still a lot of stuff to discuss, not even close. 6 months later in October, he announces the settlement. Nothing had changed. Not security, not the festival grounds being worked out, not the money. Everything stayed the same. So you accept the first offer. What lawyer takes the first offer from an insurance company? Well, they maxed out, I guess, the policy from Mandalay Bay, but MGM is self-insured. They have an SIR policy, meaning that they're up for the rest. They have to cover a certain amount, up to 50 million, and then the insurance covers the rest. But anything beyond their policy limits, MGM Mandalay Bay could have been sued. But like I said, my argument is that there's a higher level of negligence at the corporate level because they have much more involvement in security operations, security management procedures, audits, all of it. And so normally a corporate entity is not liable for like a franchise. Say Best Western, if they have an independent operator, they're not liable for their failures because it's usually just a name only kind of thing. But when you have much more to do with security policy, procedure, hiring, you go on MGM Resorts International and you look at their security jobs, they'll list out all their different properties. But then you'll see at all positions in Las Vegas. Well, if only Mandalay Bay is hiring Jesus Campos, how can Jesus Campos go work at another property that they don't own? They can't, but they can because their securities ran through MGM Resorts International. So their hiring, their firing policies, their procedures, again, they have more to do with it. And so I'm like, you have much more liability here. And you also know about all these other incidents. Not only that, most people don't know that MGM did a 7-hour deposition. So beyond, I don't think they did one on Jesus Campos. The girlfriend, Mary Lou Danley, the brother. Other than that, I think I'm the only one. 7 hours almost straight through. with like one or two small, like 10-minute breaks. So they were basically trying to interrogate me. Not only that, they brought in a third guy, and I went ahead and sent the lawyers his background before the meeting. But he's former NSA. He worked at NSA, military special, intelligence. He was there to read my body language. And so, like I said, I was trained as in interrogation tactics. I knew what they were going to do before they do it and before they did it. And I flipped the script on them during the meeting, and I got them to admit some stuff that they didn't want to admit, being that, and I got them to admit it twice, and they tried to pass it over, but basically they argued that uh, Stephen Paddock could have gone somewhere else and committed this act. I said, well, had security, and he, like I said, the lawyer he wanted that on tape so he could play it for a jury, and I wouldn't be able to rebut it. But I stopped him and I was like, no, back up. And he's like, no, 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 no. I was like, no, 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 we're backing up. And he said, well, whose deposition is this? I was like, well, now it's mine. This is what I'm thinking in my mind. I was like, no, we're going to back up from it. I said, you made this suggestion that, well, Stephen Paddock could have just gone somewhere else and committed this act. I said, well, check this out. How about security had stopped him any number of one of those times and found drills, guns, ammo in his bag and detained him? And LVMPD got called in and they found all this arsenal or went up and searched his room, that he would have never been able to go anywhere else. They would have interrogated the crap out of him and found out what his motives were, and this event would have never happened. And they tried to skip forward. They're like, coming up with excuses. I was like, no, 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 back it up. And they admitted, well, I'll give you that point twice. I've got, technically, it's not really like, it might have been illegal technically, but in California, it's a two-party state. Nevada, it's a one-party state. It's my own deposition. I recorded the entire deposition because I knew that I believed that they were going to take videos and edit it and play it for a jury and make me look bad, And so I recorded the whole damn thing. And I was like, I haven't released it, but I'm like, you're not gonna, pull this game on me. I was like, I got the whole damn thing. And so I got them to answer some interrogatories that were meant to be under oath. They were supposed to be signed by the officer that signed for it. That was an MGM Resorts executive that deals with deals with insurance. He never signed it, only their lawyer. I raised the objection that this is improper based on, it was all legal sounding stuff. I was like, this is identical to their lawyer's writing. I said, this doesn't sound like his answers, and where's his signature? I said, this was improper. I raised the objection. The judge didn't do anything about it. But all of a sudden, that lawyer was sitting in the background now, and all of a sudden, the main lawyer came forward and has been on my case since, handling it. And so when all this has happened, like I've got their interrogatories. They lied multiple times in it that are provable by the very document that they asserted as evidence, the LVMPD report. They don't tell you, they harped on Hendricks, Officer Hendricks that froze on the 31st floor. They threw him under the bus once that came out. And they're like, they fired him. They've since rehired him, but they fired him quietly. But they don't talk about the 3 armed Mandalay Bay security officers that were on the 32nd floor for nearly 4 minutes, 4 volleys while we got shot at and didn't act, including the security officer, the security manager, Anthony Scottel, Miguel Sanchez, and Paul Lancome. Those statements are in the LVMPD report. If you read their statements, they say it. Mostly Miguel Sanchez, but it's corroborated by Paul Lancome. Anthony Scottel kind of lied. He said I was on the 31st floor when he was really on the 32nd floor. They also don't mention that the camera system operator tampered with evidence. He altered the timestamps. Once you alter the timestamps, he said to match up the systems, the Pelco system and the other system. Doesn't matter. You don't alter anything. I mean, that's altering, tampering with evidence automatically. He says nobody told him to do it. Doesn't matter. That's a criminal act. Whether or not they can prove that it was criminal intent is a different story, but you've tampered with evidence. But you got to consider Luxor, all the other hotels, they've got thousands of cameras in Vegas. You're going to tell me that you don't have one video camera feed of when the windows were shot out? I'm like, baloney. They know that my video is credible. A guy like me doesn't go home and create this. And they're like, even Robert Eggers called me a conspiracy theory. I'm like, you made $100 million without going to trial. I've made it further than you and 75 law firms on my own. If you read any of Robert Eglet's writings, he's talking about how legal writings, where he's talking about the death of the American jury trial, trial lawyer. And yet he's like, we need to go to trial all the way. But then he takes $100 million and walks the hell away, or close to it, somewhere close to it, reportedly. But they made a lot of money and without going to trial. And it helps MGM, it helped Lombardo, and LVMPD, but it didn't help the victims. You got the bottom of the threshold of their top amount. But did we get any changes in security? They've had more shootings on their property since. Everybody thinks that MGM Mirage, that MGM doesn't own anymore. They just had a shooting like a week and a half ago. Two people shot, possibly a third. They've only said two people shot, one killed. But it hasn't actually been approved by the gaming board yet. It's in the process, but it's still mandatory based security. They hired the ERT guys, emergency response team. I told them, I said, that's after the fact. You're responding to an incident. That's not proactive. That's not stopping them from coming through the front door with a weapon. They had a shooting on the eve of 2020 at MGM Grand at the elevator. A guy shot off a gun. And the thing is, like, this is all after the fact. Like, even if they have AI technology, they're scanning people's face. Paddock, that wouldn't have stopped Paddock. For one, he would have had a key card to go up the elevator. For two, he had no criminal record. So that he would have never been picked up again. So that wouldn't have stopped him from checking into a secondary room under his girlfriend's name. They had a shooting on the East Coast at their property where a guy won 60 grand. His name was Nathaniel Nagby. He won 60 grand, goes back to his hotel room. He calls and brags to some friends. Some people come over. They get a key card at the front desk and go into his room. He didn't give up a secondary key card. They rob him with an AR-15 and a 9mm. They shot him in the hotel. He ran down like 17 flights of stairs and got help, but they escaped. They robbed him of his money and shot him with an AR. So the guns are still getting in. They've had armed robberies. Previously at Mandalay Bay, at Bellagio, the biker bandit, who was a judge's son, in Las Vegas. They've had all these different incidents. Not only that, like I said, you had MGM Resorts International security executive at the training event. DHS and FBI put out lone wolf attack warnings earlier that year. You had 2 ISIS threats for bombs or potential attacks that year on the Strip. So there were credible threat warnings and previous incidents that should have given them a higher state of security, especially with all those buildings surrounding the venue. And yet you got Jesus Campos, who potentially, I haven't been able to find any record of him actually having a security license, a permit. Not to say he doesn't under a different name, but I haven't found evidence of that yet. He's unarmed. He made security mistakes, walking away from the door, not calling it in sooner. When he walked up to that emergency exit door and he found it locked, he should have called it in immediately. He didn't. He walked up the next flight of stairs, walked 4 minutes roughly down the hall, took the elevator down. And the reason I know it roughly took 4 minutes to walk that hall is because there is a report of him walking from the elevator, stopping and checking a room on the 32nd floor, and then walking down. And the timing there was roughly 4 minutes. So he walked 1 flight of steps and down the hall, down the elevator. I roughly timed that at about 10 minutes, approximately, before he found the emergency exit door. Then he calls it in. So nearly 10 minutes has passed. He should have called it in before he did. Like I said, the friendship between Judge Bell and Tagliati, Judge Tagliati's relationship to her father, who would be a key eyewitness that I would call to a trial to testify on security matters. There's lots of reasons why they don't want me to have a jury trial, which I've demanded. So she rules against me on summary judgment when all it took was any dispute of fact for a jury trial to happen. But what does that do? It comes out just before the 5th anniversary. There's going to be a jury trial. MGM's in trouble because I'm not settling, and I already told them, like, there's no amount of money you're gonna pay me. I'm gonna expose you to everybody and get help, real help for everybody. And take over, take down Lombardo and Sisolak and Ford and Robert Eglett, and it potentially opens up 75 lawyers to malpractice. You know, they might not all been in on this, but they all have some liability to each and every one of their clients. And I primarily look at Eglett and Sisolak and Joe Lombardo. He never came and once took a witness statement in 5 years from me or my girlfriend, or came and collected evidence. Why not? Why would you not do that? Not once. The FBI collected. I sent them a copy of the video, and I have email traffic with them, but never came and physically came and took a witness statement either. Why not? I mean, that's a very simple question. If you don't want to know the answer, you don't come collect the evidence. Yeah, there's no reason why you wouldn't. You've got me on video being there. I'm credible. I'm a former Marine, decorated in combat. Like, why would you not come take a witness statement from somebody with such a dispute of the timeline? Because it would make them look bad, and they know it. So at the end of the day, you know, um, I'm waiting to hear from the appellate court. I don't know what they're going to decide. They're basically going to judge the case based on the evidence that's in the record. There's not a lot of evidence in it. I have a ton of evidence, and a lot of it is circumstantial, but a lot of it is documentary, news reports on different incidents, um, statements from people, you know, screenshotted text messages, and his background, his father's background, all this different stuff. It's not just a conspiracy theory. When I can name off all this stuff and back it up, I can give a credible, accounting of what he did and why, and I can justify it. That makes a lot more logical sense than there were a bunch of people in helicopters shooting at us. Baloney. First of all, the trajectories of the rounds, all that stuff would have been all around. It's hard to shoot from a helicopter. Rounds would have been falling down the shell casings unless they had catchers basically to catch the rounds. But they're finding rounds off in the bathroom. Like, all this nonsense. Like, I get that is very confusing, and that I'm not saying that there wasn't gunfire in the area afterward, because I've heard some of the videos, but that could have been people taking advantage of it. That could have been people shooting off rounds to make it, to dirty up the water, muddy the waters kind of thing. And I believe fully 100% that it was Stephen Paddock based on what I know about him and what his motivations would have been. He spent $1.6 million the week that he did this. He had 2 houses paid for. He went out and bought $100,000 for the guns. This guy was not broke and destitute. He could have survived off of 2 houses, sell one and live in the other. Like, he still had money. He's not broke and destitute. So when somebody does something like that, there's a reason, there's a motivation, and it's usually a very strong one, and it's usually revenge. Like, that's not hard to believe. They try to make it sound like, well, this is about money. Oh no, not no. Principle, revenge. You're cheating him, but yet you called his father a bank robber, and the FBI is not doing anything about these guys changing the comps and changing the deals and cheating using the court system and rigging against him. He sued for 100 grand. He's a multimillionaire. Like, he could have gave a shit about 100 grand. But once they cheated him in court, and basically said he had no valid reason to sue them. I mean, a torn hamstring? I mean, you don't fake that. I mean, there's MRIs and everything else that you go through that prove that he was hurt. Like, the revenge. I mean, it's not hard to believe that revenge was the reason, that he wanted to leave them liable. They said that he's not liable to. They weren't liable to him. Well, he left them liable with us, and they knew it. And this was potentially a $6 to $7 billion deal, and they got their insurance to cover it by lying to them and lying to everybody else and intimidating people and scaring them with the whole idea of the mob. And the damn sheriff and the FBI didn't do anything to stop it. And so I stood up to do the right thing for the right reason and tell the damn truth. And it's a miracle I'm at this point, but I fought my ass off for the last 2.5 years. I'm not giving up. I'm not going to give up. And no matter, they can cheat me, but they didn't beat me. And I know they didn't beat me. They've cheated me because I've made sound arguments. My arguments are much more plausible, and backed up with documents, backed up with evidence, than MGM just saying, no, prove it. No, prove it. Well, how can I prove it when I've asked for their security procedures, their security audits, and the judge never forced them to give them to me? A corporation is required under the law to produce documents, production of documents. They haven't. They've rejected every damn thing I've asked for, other than they were ordered by the judge to produce the interrogatories. But then what they produced shouldn't count because they weren't signed under the statute that says it requires a statute from the officer answering it. That wasn't on there. So there should be a jury trial. It should go back to the district court. That's not going to be easy for me. It costs a lot of money. I'm out of state. I got to come there, pick a jury trial, present evidence, call people. I have to pay for subpoenas of people and records. I mean, this is not easy for me, but I'm going to do every damn thing to walk in there. And I think the jury would believe all I got to do is really give an open statement, because I think real knows real when they see it. When they, what reason do I have to come there and go through 5 years of hell and start reinvestigating all this stuff, um, because I just decided what I want some attention. None of the media is covering me, so what attention am I getting? Like, I don't give a shit about that. But 60 people died, including somebody that I hope to help that reportedly passed away. I don't know if the FBI is hiding her or not, but I'm like, they deserve people to stand up for them and fight for them. And I'll be damned if, I lost a lot of friends, including my best friend, after combat, a lot of Marines that died for this country. And this is not what I came back to get shot at, for one. And two, to allow some corporations, some corrupt cops and politicians to do this to victims. They cheated the victims. That's lower than low in my book, and I just refuse to stand down. Like, somebody has to do the right thing for the right reason, no matter what. I need the money. I mean, I've spent thousands of dollars. I'm on a fixed income. I've gambled to try and come up and miracle, hoping for a miracle to win some money to pay for all this shit. And, it's I've nobody's helped me. I've had a couple people help me, and somebody that's been involved in a lot of these mass shootings. Anita Bush, she's helped me a lot. Missy has been moral support. Michelle Leonard, one of the victims, has helped me. I've had a handful of law enforcement friends that I know, retired law enforcement, and other friends that have backed me, and that believe me. I've presented it to them. They all believe me, but yet the media won't talk to me. They won't even report on it. Thankfully, Ramsey Dennison did the report, and 12 News, they put my name in it. But, like, I mean, who else is exposing the judge, the Tagliattis, the conflicts with the judge? Like, and it's not all me. Doug Papa did a fabulous job on reporting a lot of this, and a lot of the information I've got from him and from even other victims. But I've gone back and done my best to, put it all together. And it's not perfect. I'm not 100% right on everything, but I would say 99% of it is damn on point. And I'm the only one left. There's nobody else after I lose, other than the FBI coming in and doing their damn job. There is nobody else that's going to come in and do it. So I'm all that's left. Either I get my day in court or they throw it out. I will appeal to the Supreme Court, but they won't even let me submit the evidence of this stuff. And I've put it out to the public to be as transparent as possible, so they see that what I'm presenting, that it's not just bullshit, that I'm backing it up. But if the court's not going to take it, what am I supposed to do? At this point, I'm fighting, David versus Goliath. But I refuse to quit, and I won't quit. They can cheat me, but they did not beat me, is my mindset. And it's hard to beat somebody that doesn't quit. And you know what? If a Marine's not willing to stand and fight, who's going to do it? The mom that just lost her husband, the father that just lost his wife and's got two kids to raise, people that are in the hospital that have been shot. They don't have this. And I do fortunately have some background, to understand and what to look at in security and, and law, and having parents that both were in the insurance industry 40 years each. That, I grew up around hearing my dad talk about all the fraud and insurance, and knowing that my friend was shot on their property before, that the lawyers didn't bring up. Why would our own lawyers not bring forward my video? They talked about Kai Dunbar. That's it. They didn't talk about the 2007 shooting at their other property. Like, there's a lot that they could have said or done, and all they had to do was reject the settlement and keep us all together in one group. And I guarantee you, MGM would have came back with a higher number. Guarantee it. They would not have wanted a trial, but they took the only offer that they got, and that was it. But they never even brought up my video to the victim, and yet no media would speak to me. I find that pretty astonishing. And I think every other victim should. Every other, all the other people that are finding out all the stuff that they didn't know about, verify it. Look it up for yourself. Look up these other shootings that have happened on their property. See if I'm making it up, and you'll validate what I'm saying. So why would I make up a video? Like, they're the ones that have changed the timeline. They're the ones that have lied repeatedly. They're the ones that have muddied the water because they got a lot to lose. What do I have to lose? Nothing. I lost my girlfriend over this. I lost a lot of friends over this. I've been called the conspiracy theory and crazy. I might be a little crazy, but I'm not insane. And I've backed it up. Doug Papa could corroborate a lot of what's been said. Um, what more can I do as a human being other than stand up? And I wish the community would get behind me. I realize they probably signed some non-disclosures, and they're afraid, but they've lied to all of us, every last one of us. And I refuse to back down. I gave an oath to this country, disabled or not. My oath never ended, and I refuse to allow these people to walk around and bully people that have been harmed by their failures. And yes, Paddock had a lot to do with it, and he's responsible. But MGM had a lot more liability, and they failed to act, and that is reckless endangerment. That is a felony, and people should have been held accountable. And I know I've yapped everybody's ear off on this, and I hope somebody gets something from it. And I hope you guys do your own research. Look at Nathaniel Nagby. Look at his shooting at MGM Resort. Look at the MGM Mirage. If they fixed it, no, they haven't fixed it. I told them about PAT scan, the AI technology that can detect when somebody walks in with a gun, knife, keys, or a bomb. They don't want to pay for it. It eats into their profits and their CEO and executives bonuses at the end of the year. And, you know, they can put some people out there to won for a week, but then they stop doing it. But yet it keeps happening. How many more people need to die? And it's not just them. Steve Wynn got on TV and lied about the state of security at Wynn Resorts. All the at the Strat they've had, shooting. They've had all these. They just had a hookah lounge down the road that got shot up in a mass shooting. Like, how many more times does it have to happen before somebody actually does something about it? And so I'm standing, and I hope at least morally I could use some financial support. This isn't for me. I mean, I've struggled. I've put my own money in this. I've put a lot of time and effort. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I got further than Robert Eglett and 75 lawyers on my own. That's got to matter to at some level. And I've talked to some of the families that lost their loved ones, and they know something's wrong. They don't necessarily know all the details, but I filled a lot of them in, and a lot of them are going, holy shit, like they don't believe Sheriff Lombardo. They don't believe MGM one damn bit. So maybe take a chance on a guy that's risked his life, that's stepped up when nobody else would, that served his country, that's on video trying to help people. Like, why would you not take his word when they've all lied? It's on video. I can't make that shit up, So I hope that helps somebody. I hope that this puts a little bit of pressure, not necessarily on the court, but for them to not let this go, that find some damn reason that this should go to trial. We should have witnesses. And I don't want to call a bunch of people that have to relive this. I want to call the people at MGM that are responsible for security. I want to call Joe Lombardo. I want to call Jennifer Tagliati, Judge Bell. I want to call MGM Resorts International. I want to call Robert Eglett to the stand and watch them lie, because they're going to try and lie under oath. But when they find somebody that can ask questions, and they might all plead the fifth, but somebody that can actually ask questions, that's been trained in interrogations, that can catch them lying, and that knows what they're lying about and can point to it, their credibility goes out the window. And I think a jury that would hear me would know real when they hear it and know who's lying. And I think that would destroy MGM's credibility, and that even a trial happening before the public, and that they would be sued by all of their investors for fraud, and by their insurer and the victims. This would be a big deal, and I think they know it, and they deserve to all rot in hell for it, as far as I'm concerned. Um, Different levels of liability and responsibility, but they cheated the victims. And when you sue the 6-year-old kids of the deceased to try and avoid liability, what aren't you willing to do? And I have a problem with that. That's not what I believe in. That's not what I stand for, and that's not what my friends died for this country. And the hell with them. So if anybody's got questions, I will try to answer them as straightforward as possible. I'm an open book. I can tell you the story front and back because, when you're telling the truth, you don't have to lie. You don't have to remember shit. Um, they do. I don't. So
Print your
thank you.
questions in all caps in the chat, guys, and then Matt will read them off to Roger if anyone's got questions.
Sure.
Are you there, Matt?
I'm here.
Okay. They had some questions if you scroll up, but I think they should type them again so you can see them. Did you subpoena releases of all the cameras from Mandalay Bay in your lawsuit?
No, I already knew I was having problems with once I got the interrogatories and the production of records. I wanted security training records for like Campos. I wanted his security training records. I wanted their security audits of how many people they had on staff. Um, I wanted, like a 3-year history. I wanted their security policies and procedures. They didn't give me any of that. I raised that objection to the judge. She ordered them to produce the interrogatories, but then they didn't even produce what they're legally required under the law. They did that intentionally to say, well, if I released it, they put a confidentiality protective order on me, and I objected to it. And it shouldn't be valid. It should be ruled invalid because they were using it to cover up criminal negligence, and so it should be ruled invalid. But they didn't have him sign it so they could plausible deniability, and try and throw me under the bus. But they didn't produce any of the records, so if they're not going to produce even the security stuff, you think that they're going to give me the actual tapes, the real tapes? I mean, if they gave up all the tapes, then what they gave LVMPD was already edited, unless LVMPD had something to do with editing it. But they're not going to release the video that would corroborate mine, of course. But ask the question. You know, anybody ask questions like all those cameras, surrounding buildings, everything, even crowd. They didn't get my video or my girlfriend's because we left the next day and they didn't confiscate our phones. But everybody else's phones that they confiscated, you know, what happened to those videos? I mean, we'll never know. Some of them might have got it back, some might not. But MGM is not going to give up video that would do them in. They went through those videos very carefully. That's why some of them are edited. Like the timelines. Like, I mean, it's funny that you submit videos that start at 9:50. Why not 9 o'clock? Why start a minute after the time I'm claiming? When other videos go from 6 in the morning to midnight, or 6 p.m. to 6 noon or whatever. There's a series of videos from the roof that show 9:50 to 3 a.m. Like, why haven't you produced one video that shows the actual window being shot out from either room? I mean, that's a very simple question, and the reason is the logic of it is because my video will show exactly what happened, and they don't want a secondary video to corroborate my video because then there's corroboration. So they're trying to say, well, you know, they're going to try and say, well, this could have been edited or whatever. You get somebody to professionally look at this video, nothing has been edited. I've got the copy of the timestamp. They scared the shit out of my ex-girlfriend. Um, we shared the same lawyer, doctoring my documents, altering the timeline of dates, you know, telling everybody else one thing and minimizing Judge Tagliati's relationship and her father's role and is different from mine. Like, she should have never been involved in this. I mean, anybody that looks at that knows that that's a conflict of interest, regardless of any rules. I mean, it's ethics 101. You don't do that. They brought her in to protect her father and ultimately protect MGM. And Robert Eglett made a bunch of money without having to do any real work. And they want to protect the jobs or whatever at MGM. It's not really protecting them. They would have got their ass sued off by their investors for losing their money, and by the lawyers would be sued as well for malpractice. So there's a handful of bad guys in this, and I'm not saying all the lawyers were involved, but there's a handful of bad guys. It's the same bad guys involved in a bunch of different stuff in Vegas, and it's the same people over and over again that are corrupt, and they don't want to take accountability for what they've done. So there's anything that I can answer for you guys, I don't have every answer. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I do. There's a
Right.
few things that are good questions,
Danny
but
wants to
I,
know what hotel you were staying at.
Excalibur.
He also
So
wants to know if you saw the fuel tanks getting hit.
no, I did not. Personally, I did not. No. I mean, you had the big concert stage basically back. The tanks were basically back behind that to the left near the airport. But
Right.
I've seen the video of the shots and all that stuff. But um, first of all, so Paddock with that, and I'll say this: Paddock didn't know for one whether the tanks are full or not. Two, it's a 1 in a million shot on vapor to do it. You have JP 8 or JP 5, whatever it is, jet fuel, which is a higher burning temperature than gasoline. So I mean, he took a shot at these tanks, but you know he shot high. I mean, all these different factors that he didn't actually know. But I actually believe they also he brought some tannerite up into his room. You got to remember his van was packed full of tannerite.
Hmm.
Um, I believe he was actually trying to shoot down a helicopter as he shot out the window, and had it gone down and potentially detonated, his van full of explosives, that would have caused a big explosion. And then he turns and shoots at the tanks on the right. Had that detonated, you're funneling the crowd. You can't go left out on the main strip. You can't go right, and then it's nothing but pavement. It's a big fireball on both sides, and you can't go out that way. For me, tactically, that is a good theory as to funneling the crowd. And thankfully, neither one of them worked out. But it I think is very plausible. I believe he did use a small, probably bag of tannerite and stuck it on the window and shot it out when he shot out the 32-135 window, and then he probably just went over to the 32-134 and shot it out because he knew it was a lot easier. But the reason it seems like he stopped shooting because a lot of the ammo supposedly was left in the 32-134 window, and maybe a gust of wind or something, or he accidentally closed the door running in and out. He had to close the door behind him, and it locked that room, and all the ammo is still over there. So you got guns, but you got not as much ammo, and he turns around and pops himself. Like um, I don't think it's a far stretch. Um, I mean, like I said, I don't have every damn detail, but I can tell you certain details to look at that say that there was more involvement in their security failures that would have made them liable. And you gotta understand that negligence under the law best determined by a jury trial, not by a judge. But not only that, under innkeeper's law, the Supreme Court had already ruled 3 days after, like 2, 3 days after Route 91, there was a ruling in the Humphreys versus New York case where foreseeability is basically the totality of circumstances, but it doesn't even require more than one incident. I've already proven that there were a lot more incidents, even at Mandalay Bay, but that should have given a higher state, and that leaves them liable. They basically didn't warn us. They didn't guard or warn against a known unsafe condition. Now, I will say this, people could carry concealed in Nevada, right? I'm a freaking Second Amendment guy. I love guns. I grew up shooting and all that. I carried guns for years. All that. But but as a private property owner, they have the right to not allow people to come into their casino. They have the right to inspect your baggage. They have the right to say that they have a no weapons policy, which they did. Now, if you're not asserting that policy, that's like me coming on your property. If I trip and fall at your house and I bang my knee, I can file a lawsuit against your insurance. Your insurance will pay for it. But if you knew that there's a ton of bricks there and it's dark and you left them there intentionally to intentionally hurt me and I come up there, why should your insurance pay for it when you intentionally did it and you intentionally did not guard? I'm not saying that they wanted him to come shoot us all up, but they did nothing to guard against it when they knew the guns were getting in. They knew they had mass shootings before, and they didn't give a damn about us. But they could afford to take. They couldn't spend a couple $1 million on security, but they could take home a $10 million bonus at the end of the year. Like I have a problem with that. They had the concert multiple years before. They should have had a proper threat assessment done. It's called a threat vulnerability assessment. Whether or not CSC had anything to do with that as part of their contract is a different story. But the security threat didn't come from the venue. It came from Mandalay Bay, and Mandalay Bay should have, after at least after Kai Dunbar, started guarding against weapons coming in, and they did. So with the parent corporation knowing about all these other incidents at their hotels, all the robberies, they know about it. Um, they should have been taking action as a parent corporation, and they didn't. And their involvement with security leaves them liable. And
Right.
they lied, and they're trying to weasel out of it. Doing my damnedest. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen.
Well,
You know,
somebody had a different question here.
yeah, sure, go for it.
They were asking about, if you subpoenaed any FOIA docs or discovery that hasn't been released to the public.
Uh, no, I have not because, like I said, once I requested those, because subpoena is going to cost me money, and
Hmm.
serving them and everything else. Once I knew that I wasn't getting the security docs, so I could look at their procedures and the policies and their audits and see whether or not after other incidents they increased security or not.
Hmm.
Once they weren't giving me that, I knew that. I mean, they're stonewalling everything.
Right.
Like I mean, they even lied and said, "Well, we had nothing to do with the festival." I got the festival permit. I did get that from the fire department. So, and it shows. It's signed by MGM Resorts production corporate manager. And they lied about that. So you have more to do with the festival than you said. You have more to do with security at Mandalay Bay and other properties. You know,
Roger,
yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but Joe was asked a couple times, were you ever able to identify yourself watching any of those videos they released,
Oh
like the
yeah.
CCTV footage and stuff? You
Yeah,
found
there's a
yourself?
video out. There's a body cam. I think it's batch number 26, 385. It shows us throwing Sam Arjun in the dumpster and wheeling her out. And so I'm actually the guy on the left. It's about 8 minutes into the video. You'll see me. I'm wearing a black shirt with a big circle. It says Full Circle Saloon on it. But I have glasses on my head, and we're the ones that pushed her out. I wasn't doing it alone. I had help, but I ended up putting her in the car and then putting a tourniquet on her. And she's the last victim that's deceased now. I believe that girl that we carried out and threw in the back of the SUV that was paralyzed. I believe that's the second girl that died. That was has been paralyzed since. So, and like I said, I've struggled with the whole Carrie Ray Barnett incident. I wish I could have helped her. I should have helped her, but I did what I was trained to do, and unfortunately, it turns out that I was right. But I had a lot of sleepless nights over that, and that young girl. None of these people should be dead, none of them. And I'm standing my ground because nothing has changed, and I refuse to. I want my kid to come to Vegas when she turns 21. Rite of passage, go partying, hang out at casinos and poolside and all that, concerts. But I'll be damned if I'm going to let somebody else come back there and get mowed down inside a casino or at a concert, all because they don't want to spend some money, and that's that's disgraceful. My friends died for this country, and not to allow this kind of shit to happen. And I get that we can't stop everything, but they do have a right to reject somebody that's carrying a gun. They do have a right to turn you away. They have a right to inspect, and they haven't done it. They're not doing it, and not even randomly with Paddock. And they've had more shootings. How many more is it going to take before? How many poor people need to die before we do something to act? And there is technology out there that's non-invasive. You don't have to stop every person at the door. You don't even have to open their bags and search. You can screen them, X-ray technology. I've actually been trained on that technology, backscatter type technology, that scanning vehicles, all that kind of stuff. They're not doing this. They don't want to spend the money, and I have a problem with that. So if there are any other questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Okay. Well, somebody was asking about the what did you do when the shots rang out? But they can go back and look at the video, at the beginning of the video when you're talking.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
I basically just heard pop, pop, pop up again, and I started moving out of the vineyard with my girlfriend at the time. So
trying to think, trying to
Okay,
see if there's
Joe's
anything.
asking, he specifically, when you were talking about finding yourself on body cam, he
yeah,
was specifically asking, could you find yourself on that
yes.
CCTV footage that they showed too?
It wasn't on CCTV footage that I saw specifically. It was on the body cam of one of the officers. I believe it's batch number 26, number 385. Don't quote me on that, but um, it's near gate 6, and the officer comes in, and basically we started going back. It's about 8 minutes into the video, but it's the one where Sam Arjun is put into the trash can and we wheel her out. So you can verify that I was there, and I was sitting in I was in the disabled section. I had a disabled bracelet because I couldn't stand all night, especially multiple nights in a row. But at the time, I was just in front of the disabled section, in front of private boxes on the far side of the stage, away from Mandalay Bay.
Somebody was asking, did you talk with the judges who recused themselves from the case?
None of them have recused themselves from the case. That's the problem. They're all buddy friends, and they
Yeah.
should have recused. Judge Tagliati and Jennifer Bell specifically.
Does anybody have any more questions?
I'm hoping for the crowd. I'm hoping that you guys start banding together and demanding from your media. They should be reporting on this story. I mean, this is not about kudos for me or anything like that. I know I've made it far. It's a miracle. Like nobody ever expected me to get this far. I don't really give two shits about fame. Um, I want to move on with my life. I haven't gotten any closure either. I mean, everybody got a little bit. They think it's closure because well, we got some money and we're gonna move on, but you never got the truth. Nothing got fixed in security, and for 5 years, this has haunted me too. And I didn't take the money. I could have used that money and just tried to move on, but that wasn't the right thing to do. I knew too much to stand down and say no. Somebody's got to do it. And like I said, if a Marine or a law enforcement officer had this information and wasn't willing to stand up and do it, was I expecting the parent that just lost their spouse or kid, that are devastated and like who's supposed to do it? And unfortunately, I have a little bit of a background in this kind of stuff and security and everything else, and I know how to weed through some bullshit. At the end of the day, and everybody knows there's some bullshit in this deal. You
Right.
know, so
Somebody else asked, did you watch any of the Vegas investigation channels during all this?
I've watched almost every video that I could get my hands on, even including Mindy Robinson's documentary. I mean, I've watched everything I could possibly watch. I know there's video missing. I know they're hiding
Well, of
video.
course.
But what it is, I mean, I know where to point, what time, and where to what video I should be looking for because I got the video. But a corroborating video, they're never going to produce. But like I said, at the end of the day, this is not. There's laws that have been broken, criminal laws that are beyond a reasonable doubt, and a criminal case could come from a civil case. Usually, it's a criminal case and then it turns into a civil case, but it could go in reverse in this case. But that's at a higher standard for fraud and you know conspiracy and all that kind of stuff and tampering with evidence. That's at a higher level. But for a civil jury trial, it's to the preponderance of evidence. And I think a jury would believe me, and that's why they don't want to give me a jury trial because they know I'm credible, and that you know, like who the hell comes up with this kind of shit? Like
Right.
who would make up this kind of shit? Like, and it is on video getting shot at during it. Like you don't go home and come up with this kind of crap. So, um, and like I said, there's corroborating statements from people that died. My ex-girlfriend, video of it, of some of my actions, my record as a Marine, like training, all that kind of stuff. I've produced. I did a 7-hour deposition. I had nothing to hide. They're the ones hiding everything. So who do you? I mean, I would think a jury would believe me right away because they're hiding everything. Like that's what lawyers do. I get it, but it's
Yeah, but it's
bullshit.
not the right thing to do, though, for them.
No, it's not.
It's
And,
unethical.
no, it is unethical. This is way past unethical. And Robert Eglett was our lawyer. What the fuck? You
yeah.
know?
Well, that's.
I mean,
But it's
everybody,
also Las Vegas, though.
and that's what it is. I mean, hell, even Doug Papa, Robert Eglett. When you watch the video of him announcing the settlement,
Mhm.
I mean, everybody's going, I mean, when I looked at it, I was like, whose lawyer is he? Ours or theirs? I mean,
Right.
like what the fuck? Like I hate to cuss, but I guess I'm a Marine. It kind of comes with the territory. But I've had to bite my tongue in court. I've not cussed in court. I've wanted to light them all up. Like
Can't blame you.
I wanted to knife hand the shit out of them, and because they're full of shit.
Right.
It's caused a lot of harm to a lot of lives. And I mean, I almost killed myself for this twice. I ended up in the hospital. I broke apart several of my relationships. Everybody thinks I'm nuts. I might be a little nuts. You got to be a little nuts to run into gunfire to stick this out. You got to be a
Well,
little,
you're a Marine, so
but you have to got to
you've
have a little bit of
experienced that
balls.
many a times. So
Yeah, and that's really the
that's
difference.
your
But
nature. So I understand where you're coming from on that.
you know, and that's basically what it boils down to. And I just refuse to back down. I guess I'm that crazy sob, but
Well, sometimes you have to be crazy in order for things to get done.
exactly. And
You know.
it takes some guts to I mean, hell, I you got to watch your back every day. Even my dad calls me every day, and he's like, "Watch your back. You never know.
Right.
These guys finding
But
bodies of like me. But I'm like, the hell with them. Like I've been shot at so many damn times even before this. I'm
mm,
like, I'm not afraid of them. Like screw these guys. Like personally, I think the old mod would have whacked these bean counters for pulling this shit because they would have known, let's fix this and take care of our our guests and like Kurt Kerkorian did back in the '80s fire and get back to business as usual and make people feel safe again. Instead, they lied, cheated, and stole. Like
right.
I think they would have ended up whacking them for doing this shit.
Exactly. But I
And
also want to thank you for your service to this
I,
country.
I appreciate that. And
It's very
like
much
I said,
appreciated.
Yes,
it's
definitely. Thank you for your service. Joe was in the chat. I think he left. He was a Marine too. And Danny, who's in the chat, he also was over in Iraq. So at
okay.
least you guys all have that kind of stuff in common.
And I think once you talk to those guys, if they've been around the block at all, they'll know real when they hear it. Like I said, this story isn't really about me. I mean, a lot of it's kind of become, I'd like to be able to tell my story. I mean, I think it's unique, but this is not about kudos or fame. Like, who the fuck would want to go through this for a little bit of fame? Like
No.
I certainly wouldn't. I mean, I'd give it up all tomorrow to go back to that day and never have it happen. But
But there are people on the other side of this,
they don't
like,
want my story told because they know it's
well, yeah,
true.
but not only that, the lawyers that are involved in all this, like
Oh
Eglet,
yeah, you're talking
of
major
course,
malpractice.
it's a big case. Gets him a lot of recognition, a lot of fame. He's willing to do anything at all costs. So,
Pretty much,
and that's
$100
sad.
million on the line. Who wouldn't? I mean, like, he just never thought. They just never thought anybody would figure out what they were doing or have come up with the information or have the information already to call them all liars. They took the easy route instead of
Right.
doing the right thing, and they just never expected somebody to actually do the right thing and not take the money, or be afraid of them. So fuck those guys. So I appreciate you guys letting me come on.
Well, we thank you for coming on and telling your story. We appreciate it very much. We really haven't had anything. Nobody has done anything
There
lately
hasn't been
on
any new
Vegas.
info in so long. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's good to have someone
yeah. We
come
haven't
on
had
and
any
give us
new
the
info
story.
since May of 2019,
Yeah,
right.
it's been a long
and now
time.
this is August of 2022. So
I'm hoping something happens and maybe some pressure. Somebody comes forward. Law enforcement or people need to do the right thing. I get it. They're all afraid. Lombardo's. He, the only reason he's running is him and Sislak need to cover each other's ass so they can pardon each other at the end of
right,
the day. Because these guys are both. Neither one of them are good for the state. Aaron Ford needs to go. He's not doing his job. The FBI's got some liability on this as well, for not doing their job. And I'm hoping they come in and do their job. But with all the shit going on in the world and all the corruption that even at the FBI right now, you know, I've lost a lot of confidence. And I have friends that actually work at the FBI that I've reached out to, but this is at a higher level. I've contacted DOJ. I filed OIG complaints, Inspector General complaints. I filed complaints with Aaron Ford's office. I mean, I've done everything I can humanly possibly do. As I don't have unlimited resources, I'm trying to do this by myself. I would love to have a team of lawyers behind me because we'd wax their ass in a heartbeat if I had a halfway different, a team behind me. But it's me, But
Right.
I've done everything I can. Hey, if Robert Eglet's the top 36 lawyers in the country, what does that say for him? A fucking bonehead Marine, that got further than him in 75 law firms.
Right.
I'd be a little embarrassed. I mean, they didn't bring in bullshit lawyers. I mean, MGM's lawyers are super lawyers. They've been super lawyers like the last 10 years in a row, against little old me. So they got to be afraid of something. They don't want a jury trial because they know what I've got to say and what I can prove uh, buries them. And
Well, they don't want the truth getting out. That's the whole point. They,
yeah, muddy the water,
it's kind of like the old saying, the truth will set you free, but they don't want the truth to get out because
yeah,
then it's going to cause big problems for them,
and
especially
it
in Las
should.
Vegas.
The, the the truth, if the truth can kill them, it should. Like,
Right? Exactly.
it should.
Exactly.
They're not too big to fail. All these other big corporate companies are going to come in. I mean, even if Caesars took over, like, there's other gaming companies out there that would come in and put the people back to work. It wouldn't miss too much of a beat. But the problem is, MGM executives would personally be sued, and they don't want to lose their house and cars, for their involvement and knowledge. So they got a million reasons why they don't want the truth coming out because it affects them personally. And they paid James Moran $22 million plus. I think he walked away with another, or 32 million, and walked away with another 22 million in stock. But they only paid out of pocket 49 million in a death to 60 people, not even $1 million a person. I mean, I have a problem with that.
It's ridiculous the small amount that they paid.
Yeah. And it's funny, 49. It's almost like they're sending a message like, why not 810 million, 850? Why 49 million? 949 is what time I said that was the true timeline. They originally started with 10:05, then they went to 10 or 9:59. No, I'm saying 10 minutes even before that, 9:49. And 16 minutes is a big deal. So I got to get going. I got my girlfriend to take care of. So I appreciate you guys. Let me come on. I really appreciate it. Hopefully
Well, thank
somebody
you
gets something
so
out of it.
much for sharing all your information with us too. It's good to see you be able to publicly speak out.
Yeah, I wish some of these bigger media outlets would at least cover it. Like I said, I don't need name recognition. I just need them to. They should be investigating this shit. I
They
mean, that's what.
dropped it so fast, and the Las Vegas Review Journal, I think, was one of the last ones that was still covering it, but Sheldon Adelson owns them, so he
Right.
probably nipped that because they weren't even covering it shortly after. So it's like the world moves on, and they are just waiting for us to all forget, which we won't.
And I told MGM that I was like, look, you think this is just going to go away every anniversary, 5 year, 10 year, 25 year? It's not going to go away. But
Nope.
also that now that you have the fifth anniversary, they're going to start coming out with some new stories on what's going on 5 years later, and they should be reminded of what they've allowed to happen. They have much more liability than just Stephen Paddock's act. So, again, thank you guys so much. I hope it helps in some way. I want to move on just like the rest of you, but true healing doesn't begin. And unfortunately, I've learned this the hard way prior to this incident. That's why I'm standing is true healing doesn't begin until you know the truth. Because then at least you know the damn truth is told and you can move forward. But when you always got the money runs out eventually in most instances. But if you still don't have the answers, you're always going to wonder what
Well,
the
they
truth
always
is.
say big corporations just, drag people out in court so long.
Well, they've tried. I I made some maneuvers that they didn't expect that shorten it a little bit. Some of it, happenstance. Like I said, I don't know how far much further it's going to go, but it should go to trial. I mean, and honestly, they would probably offer me a bunch of money to not go to trial at that point. But I've told them I'm not going away without them helping everybody. So thank you guys so much. I am going to run. You guys have a wonderful night and thank you.
You
Best of
too.
luck to
Thanks
all
for
Thank
of
you
you.
coming
so
on.
much, Roger.
I'll keep in touch. So
Alrighty.
thank you. Bye.
Anyone that missed the beginning, go ahead and rewind because he told his story about when he was at the venue at the beginning of the stream. But thank you all for watching. Hit the thumbs up. Thanks, Matt, for coming on too.
No problem.
And everybody have a good night.